All right, everyone, link in the description to RCP's Trump approval page. He is back at 45% approval. He had a little bit of a lull there and dropped to like 43.8 or something. You've got two new polls, Rasmussen, and the other one is Reuters. They're both showing him respectively at 50 and 44. Now, Rasmussen always overestimates his support because I think they still do landline polling as well. So they always overshoot the mark. But if you look at a scattering, if you look at the aggregate overall, yeah, his approval in the aggregate being 45, maybe a little bit higher, it makes sense if you look at all of the polling. By the way, Economist YouGov showing him at 46. Now, the Economist was the closest to the mark in both the last midterms and the 2016 election. And it was one of the most accurate in 2014 and 2012. I have a tendency to believe that whatever methodology they're employing is better than most of the polling firms. It's more stable. That is, it's riding closer to the aggregate. It's almost never an outlier poll. With all these others, they sometimes will over or undercut the aggregate by a significant enough total to question them. That's not usually the case with YouGov. So I believe that his approval is somewhere around there, 45, 46%. Now, what I've expected all along is that this would happen, which is that once the race began, Trump, instead of being compared to an amorphous insert Democrat here, would have actual people to sort of run against. That's buoying his support. When the race clears, when the field begins to narrow, his support will rise further. If the candidate is far left, you can look towards him being at 48 to 50% by election day, I would think. Assuming no major scandals, the economy doesn't go into recession or something like that, I would expect his approval to be higher than Obama's was at that point as well. That's what I expect. If it's a neoliberal, he'll probably be riding around the same, be at 47. He'll manage to be reelected probably because his opponent will have no turnout. But he won't. It won't. It'll be better for Trump if the far leftists win. In the party's paradigm schism right now, it'll be better for him if the candidate he's running against is a Kamala or someone like that, or a Bernie Sanders. He'd crush them. If it's a Joe Biden, he wins probably. But it doesn't, it wouldn't be ground changing. It wouldn't be an upswelling of red support as much because people would be less concerned. Like the Republicans, the older Republicans will vote out of fear if there's a Bernie Sanders running against him. Meanwhile, the far left will manage to get a lot higher youth turnout, but the business Democrats will abandon them probably, which means Trump will win. That's my operative sort of prediction and has been basically since 2016 ended. You got to understand, most of his opponents aren't viable. But the reason why his approval is rising is, as I've said, because he's being compared to things. It's not so much his successes or failures that are driving at this point his numbers. They're remarkably stable over time. He's been riding between the 42 to 45 mark for a year now, and it's been very, very stable. Sometimes he goes down a bit for a few days, up a bit for a few days. It's just snap polling after events. Like something really good happens, his approval temporarily rises a couple points. Something that's perceived of as bad happens, it falls 2 or 3 points, in the aggregate, of course. Then it goes right back within a week or two. That's just statistical noise. You can see a very smooth long-term trend. It is slightly upwards, the trajectory, and has been since roughly the time that the election started cooking up. Wow, it's almost as though that was inevitable, but it's going to keep happening. That upward trajectory will continue through the primaries at least, leading him probably to 47 or 48 by the time the Democrats have a nominee. They'll be riding 50-50. Now, all of these other polls, which aren't even aggregated, by the way, show, wow, every Democrat leads Trump by a huge margin. Well, that sounds a lot like 2016 now, doesn't it? Because all of the Democrats led Trump in a matchup then as well. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win by, 5 or 6 points, according to the last aggregates that you had. Even at times when Trump was doing well, I don't think there was ever a single matchup that showed him ahead of Hillary Clinton. But number one, it matters what states you're talking about. Some of the states that are in play, like Minnesota, are doing better than the average, like economically. Minnesota's been riding far ahead. It is now, in my mind, in play as a state, especially since you've got a legislator there that is very unpopular, very far left, and very, very much at the forefront of the Democratic Party. If Trump manages to keep that being the case, he can target Minnesota and potentially win it. He can take the final piece of the Rust Belt that he needs to really seal the deal with a paradigm shift there, I think. if he can manage to retain Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and grab up Minnesota, and Ohio's not in play, don't let anyone fool you, then that's pretty great. The Democrats, meanwhile, are going to heavily target Nevada and Colorado, part of their blue wall strategy. You can expect them to do some outreach in Texas, although I don't think they're delusional enough to think that if they sink 10 million in there that they magically flip it. And then Arizona would be a big one as well. Basically the Southwest. They're going to the Southwest due to demographic shift, and they're hoping to become, we're the Latinx party. We're the party of pandering, basically. Trump is doing the economic thing, and he's actually got a platform. It's like Elizabeth Warren has decided to cast aside the idea of a positive campaign, and her campaign now has devolved into Orange Man Bad, the same as many other people's. Like literally, if you look at the vision of the top Dems, what is their vision? What are they actually standing for? In Joe Biden's case, it's, hey, can we return to normalcy? Let's return to the Obama era and slip back into slumber. Ironically, that's the more palatable of the top campaigns. Elizabeth Warren's is, we've got a racist in the White House, we must do everything to remove him. Sanders is, I want to give you free shit, which that's more palatable unless you're a higher info voter and you actually understand what that means, which is more taxes for everybody, including the lower class. And then you have Kamala Harris. Hers is like a knockoff Elizabeth Warren, but she's black, and so this matters to her and to her fans. There's a reason she's declining, which is also exactly as predicted. Kamala Harris's trajectory upwards was too steep for her to maintain it. It was clear that she wasn't going to keep rising forever. At some point she levels out and then she begins to recede. This already happened to other candidates, but you could argue that Bernie Sanders has already had his day in the sun very, very early on, I think before Biden technically even got in, and has been receding since then. Elizabeth Warren is literally the only other one with a stable upward trajectory, and it's leveled out enough now so that if the election is held at the time we would consider it to be held at, Biden still wins. New slew of polling comes out. He's ahead still in every one of the first 4 states. It will probably be a Trump-Biden matchup. It'll be a boring election, therefore, for the Democrats. For the Republicans, hey, they get mean tweets and Trump being saucy on a debate stage. That's fucking all that they want. Meanwhile, on the other side, what do they get? They're going to get a firebrand sort of approach from Biden, who's already shown that he really wants to say Orange Man Bad. Remember when he said, oh, I'd like to punch that dude in the head, and stupid shit like that, like challenging him to push-ups and stupid things like that. And it's like, he tries to be tough. It's not going to work. You're going to, trust me, if Joe Biden gets on the debate stage, there's going to be fireworks. It's going to be fireworks in the sense that he's going to try to be challenging and intimidating to Trump. Trump is going to be dismissive, antagonize him as a dirty old man, and he's going to flip his shit. Joe Biden might be the first contender to actually flip out on a debate stage in quite some time. Meanwhile, nobody else can beat Trump either, probably. Buttigieg, I feel sorry for him. Through no fault of his own, he's sliding backwards. He briefly became the corporate kid and absorbed more money than Biden has, and yet it hasn't affected his standing at all. He's in a deep, distant 5th place. And Trump is riding on 45% approval now. And this is in the aggregate of polls. Again, never look at a single poll. Look at the aggregates. Use RCP. It's the best. You'll see a slew of polls. The numbers are not all going to agree with one another. Also look at the methodology. Is it likely or registered voters? That matters a little bit, although the numbers are fairly stable for both. Trump is almost always behind. That's sort of a given at this point. He faces a never-ending, from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to bed, the legacy media says nothing but negative things about him. Do you think that the average person would even be at 45% approval in the same job facing the same obstructionism from the corporate media? It really is legendary. I mean, poll of polls sort of style analysis-wise. If you look at news stories, George W. was treated better post-Katrina than Donald Trump has been treated in his entire presidency. The shtick has begun to wear thin, though. What this shows me is that people are becoming more and more resistant to the propaganda of the corporate media, and it's beginning to dawn on them the Democrats are nuts. They've overplayed their hand. That's, by the way, going to hurt them. The economy's doing well. We're not in any major wars. There are no major problems currently going on in the country. That's really what it's about. I would expect Trump's approval to keep rising generally. It's like in the wake of his more racist tweets. It's funny how CNN, at this point, CNN's not even trying to hide their bias. They just say, oh, in response to Trump's racist tweets, like, as though it was a settled science that they were racist. In the wake of that, he'll probably lose a point or two of support in the aggregate, because none of these polls reflect that. Their polling periods begin before that happened, although I think the last two end thereafter. So you haven't seen the effect, the fallout from that, but I wouldn't expect it to be long-lasting. It'll be a week later, the aggregate will go back to normal. It'll be back at 44, 45, and slowly inching his way upwards. Every time the Democrats do something stupid, his approval rises. He's building a solid core of support that is far larger than any coalition I think they're going to be able to scrape together. And CNN can ignore this all it wants. I don't fucking care. They were wrong then. They were wrong about the blue wave. They've been wrong about basically everything. The fact that people take these groups seriously in their polling analysis at this point, or that their polls are even aggregated to tell the truth, is hilarious to me. It's a high source of amusement. That's about all. Peace out.